Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Countercurrents. I'm Larry Johnson. Please hit that like and subscribe button and tell your family and friends about the channel. Today, I'm going to be chatting with two dear friends, Nima Alkhorshid and Professor Mohammad Marandi. Both, I jokingly call them Marandi as the Virginian because he was born in Virginia, and Nima the Brazilian because he lives and works in Brazil. Both are professors. But we're going to talk about what the real situation is in Iran and hopefully help you better understand what the truth is in the face of so much propaganda designed to portray Iran as a place of evil and as an enemy of the world, which it is not. Thanks for watching. Yeah, I mean, just for your information, when I recorded the introduction, I said, I used my standard line. I've got the Virginian and the Brazilian, and we're going to talk about Iran. But okay, let's start with the current events. So we're recording this on Wednesday. Hopefully, it'll go up tomorrow, Thursday. Boy, things are changing rapidly. So at 1 o'clock yesterday, East Coast time, just slightly before 1, getting ready to do Danny Davis. Newsflash: talks are off. They're not going to. The United States issued these demands, and Iran said, "No, go screw yourself. We're not doing that." We'll talk about nukes, we'll talk about enrichment, but nothing else. No, you can't. We're not going to talk about missiles. We're not going to talk about our support for the groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. And then, I get done with Danny Davis and get ready to start another interview, and the talks are back on. Was that being widely reported in Iran yesterday, or was that something just for the us outsiders? Let's start with Nima. What were you seeing or hearing?
Yeah, it was actually whenever something comes out, everybody would know what is happening, and they were saying that. So what's going on? The United States has decided, because they were the basic points, in my opinion, that it was that the United States wanted to negotiate in Turkey, in Istanbul,
right?
And first of all, and Iran didn't want to, go there, and Iran had their option on the table. They were talking about Oman and Muscat being part of, the main, because you remember the last time they were negotiating before the war breaking out between the two parties, they were negotiating in Oman. That's why Iran sees that as a viable choice right now to go in that direction. So then they talk about, the ballistic missiles. The United States wants to put some limits on the ballistic missile program, which is, everybody knows that that's a red line for anybody. I would say that even for the supreme leader of Iran, that's a red line for him. He never talks about, it's a basic, to survive in this wild, planet we're living in. And then they said that Iran would not support the, Houthis. They're talking about Ansarullah and Hezbollah.
Right.
And we see finally everything breaking down, and then let's talk in Oman, and all those options are off the table. It's a propaganda machine, Larry. Even before coming to this live, they were talking about, the Al Jazeera coming with new narrative. They have somehow leaked out the agenda of negotiations. They said that Egypt, together with Turkey and Qatar, they leaked this information, and it's unbelievable. And I think it's part of the propaganda. They trying to do everything because they have this weapon in their hand. They have all these weapons in their hand. They want to, somehow, attack and, make some sort of bubble for the Iranian people. But after all, you see that everybody's sitting in their home. They say, that's a propaganda. They're trying to manipulate the situation.
Yeah.
It is the whole game, in my opinion.
Professor, I think Marandi I may be responsible for the Shahed 149 drone that was shot down, and let me explain why. Sunday is on January 30th, as I understand it. The video footage from the Shahed was broadcast on Press TV, showing the aircraft carrier and such. And so I wrote about that, and I said, the drone was able to overfly the aircraft carrier, no reaction. Either they didn't detect it or they just thought it wasn't important. And I'm beginning to think, and so I wrote that up, and I think somebody at the Pentagon read it and go, damn it, we're going to shoot that down. It's not going to do that again. What's your take?
Well, one thing that I think is important for your viewers to know, excuse me, to know is that Iranians are probably the most well-informed people about anything that's said about their country that's negative. Because there is a huge Persian language media apparatus funded by Western governments in the West, based in the West, television channels in the hundreds, and websites, cyber armies. So even during those days when we didn't have internet, or when the internet was just Iranian and local, satellite TV was full of anti-Iranian propaganda. So people always knew what the Americans were saying about Iran. People always know what the British, the French, the Germans, what the Israeli regime and others are saying about Iran. They know. We hear more from them than we hear from Iran in general. That's a general fact. You have like a news channel in Iran, then like the 3-4 main channels, they have an evening news and a nighttime news, and that's it basically. But you have like all sorts of anti-Iranian news channels from abroad that 24 hours a day are producing misinformation, disinformation, they're spinning the news and so on. So Iranians always hear the news. Like what was happening yesterday, you could get the different interpretations of it from a host of different sources. In general, though, as Nima pointed out, some things are clear to Iranians that no one is going to negotiate. For example, the Iran's missile capabilities or its regional alliances. And so, as soon as Al Jazeera starts saying that, they know that this is propaganda. Either Al Jazeera is producing propaganda, because at the end of the day, Al Jazeera is in the American camp. It may say positive things about Palestine, but ultimately it's in the American camp. Either Al Jazeera is making this up, or the Turks and the Egyptians and the Qataris produce some ridiculous document in order to please Trump. But it's not something that Iranians would even take note of. I think the most...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're saying.
No, I was looking for, there was a news report earlier saying that Egypt, Qatar, and I forget the other country,
Turkey.
were offering to mediate the talks, but they were insisting that one of the things that they were supposedly pushing is that Iran wouldn't be able to use ballistic missiles for 3 years. And I'm thinking, if I was Iran, I'd tell them, hey, shut up. We're not interested in what you think.
All right, folks, hold on just a second. We've got something important to share with you. First off, a big thank you for all your incredible support. Our team's been putting in the hours, really working hard to bring you insightful guests, new and improved formats, solid, high-quality analysis every week. Our next goal, hitting that 100,000 subscriber mark and getting that silver button. Let's make it happen together. Every like, comment, share, and subscription truly helps us grow and keep improving. All right then, let's get back to the video.
Well, I think probably one reason why Iran has chosen Oman is that Oman has over the years been careful not to behave in such a manner. Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, these governments have always played into the American hand. That we saw, for example, when Trump went to Egypt, they all participated and they all tried to whitewash Trump's role in the genocide in Gaza. So I think probably Oman. I hear that if Iran's second choice after Oman was Baghdad, but in any case, the talks will be held in Oman. I'm pretty sure that they will take place, but it's unclear what will happen because Iranians are not going to give up enrichment.
Right.
They're not going to give up their nuclear program. They will be able to, if the Americans are reasonable, to do a deal not like the JCPOA, because the Iranians don't like the JCPOA. It was deeply flawed, but a better deal, which reflects Iran's technological advances. But I don't think that Trump has that capability. I think actually Trump is being pushed even by his antagonists in Washington towards conflict. So, for example, I think the role played by the New York Times and other media outlets is intentionally to push the to prevent any sort of incentive in the White House for a deal. I think in general, the political establishment, and which is of course Zionist dominated, doesn't matter if they're Democratic or Republican. So I'm pessimistic about a deal, but it's not impossible. But there's no doubt that Iran will not accept zeroing enrichment or limiting its missile and drone capabilities, or retreating from its alliances and that sort of thing. It's just not going to happen.
Do either of you think that is there a compromise? But I have given my opinion that thinking that one thing Iran might be willing to discuss. Okay, we'll limit what enrichment we do, but then I also heard a statement yesterday that previously Iran was willing to move some of its enriched uranium off to, say, Russia, but now they've said, no, we're not even doing that now. It's gonna stay here in Iran. Nima?
I think as far as I know about that case is that this particular moment that we are in right now, Iran has no reason to move anything to outside of Iran into the enriched uranium. They're not talking about it nowhere in the media, in the domestic media. They're not talking about it. The main issue with the nuclear program right now and what they have on the table, what they're willing to talk about, is the enrichment and the future of nuclear program of Iran. Iran is prepared to produce each and every document to assure the Trump administration or the United States that Iran is not pursuing nuclear bombs, not pursuing nuclear weapons. That's the whole reason that Iran is willing to do the negotiations, because the policy, the strategy on the part of the Iranian government, it's been, in my opinion, hasn't changed, and that's why they're willing to talk with the United States. And that's all I can say. I cannot say that they can go 1 inch forward, in sending any sort of, enriched uranium to Russia or any other country, any third country. And the whole thing is to de-escalate with the United States and ensure that Iran is not willing to produce nuclear weapons. That's all, in my opinion.
I'm looking at this. We've been getting bombarded with reports that, the attack's imminent. I keep hearing from it's going to be in the next 2 or 3 days. I do think if an attack is going to happen, it's going to happen within the next 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at the max, because Iran, Russia, and China are going to conduct their annual naval military exercise. I've heard everywhere from the the middle of February to the end of February. Normally, it was like in the first week of March. And I think if that the United States is not going to attack Iran if Iran's sailing around with Chinese and Russian warships. What's your take on it, Professor Marandi?
I think that the Iranians at least feel that they are in a very strong, excuse me. I've had this cough for many weeks and I don't know why it's not going away, but
I understand. I got dripping sinuses. That's blowing my nose here.
So I think that the Iranians feel that they're in a commanding position. First of all, they're confident about their military, and the Iranians have a long-range missile capability that we've seen used against the Israeli regime, and which has been strengthened and developed further since the war. But most of Iran's missile capabilities are not even directed towards the Israeli regime. They are anti-ship missiles. There are medium-range missiles directed towards the Persian Gulf. There are short-range missiles, drones, and also, of course, the Navy and small submarines, mini submarines, speedboats. All of these are directed towards the United States, not towards Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that the United States has been threatening to attack Iran for over 2.5 decades.
Yeah, well, 46 years,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But after invading Iraq and Afghanistan, it rose to a different level of importance in Tehran. So they began developing all these underground cities for missiles and drones and other capabilities, which are directed towards the Persian Gulf. And of course, in addition to that, they have the long-range missiles that can be used from deep inside Iran. So one reason why the U.S. aircraft carrier has gone so far away from the Iranian coast is because it's fearful of Iran's missile capabilities. And one thing that I have heard from a very credible source is that the Iranians have also stationed anti-ship missile systems alongside the coast of the Persian Gulf, where there are no American ships. And that sends a signal to countries in the Persian Gulf that host U.S. bases. And I think that basically means that if there's war, those tankers are no longer going to be able to take oil or gas or anything else to or from the Persian Gulf region. There will be the end of trade in the Persian Gulf. So you have this enormous capability directed towards the United States, towards its bases, but you also have this immense firepower that's directed to the other side and the Persian Gulf itself, and the other side of the Persian Gulf not being very far away.
Yeah.
So it's not like Israel. It's very close. If anyone looks at the map, you don't need long-range missiles to destroy these key facilities, which are not all that many alongside the other side of the coast, on the other side of the coast of the Persian Gulf. And of course, Iran would have the legitimate right to do so because all of these tiny regimes have U.S. bases. And as we speak, those bases are being used against Iran, even now. So if it was under normal circumstances, I would say that the chances for a U.S. strike on Iran are zero or virtually zero. But since you have the immense power of the Zionist lobby and Israeli firsters in the White House, in the Senate, in the House, and because of the nature of Trump and his personality and his past, I wouldn't bet on anything if I was a betting man, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that if there is war, the United States would lose. So on the whole, I think that taking everything into account, I would imagine that the Iranians feel that the chances for war are not very high right now, but that they're only preparing themselves for war. And as we speak, they are preparing. In other words, every day they are developing their defensive and offensive capabilities. And the head of the Iranian armed forces, or I'm not sure who said this, but senior figures in the Iranian army and the Revolutionary Guards have said that Iran's military doctrine has shifted from defensive to offensive.
Mm-hmm.
So for now on, Iran is going to be more focused on heavy strikes, on swiftly destroying the enemy. That will be the priority rather than defending itself against enemy attacks. So I think probably if there's war, Iran will they've already said, as we all know, that even a small attack by the United States will be considered to be a war, and Iran will retaliate with everything it has. And so I think that if there's a U.S. attack, the oil and gas markets immediately will go through the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry, just to mention, since Dr. Marandi forgot his name, it was the Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi. He said after the 12-day war, Iran's military doctrine has shifted from defensive to offensive with a focus on asymmetric warfare. This is what we've heard here in Iran.
Well, I know that Doug McGregor and Colonel Danny Davis and myself, the three of us are in agreement that, because we've heard through various contacts we have within the Pentagon and U.S. Air Force military, the general view within the U.S. military is that they can easily defend against Iranian missiles, and that Iran, they really believe that, and they believe that Iranian air defense is so weak that we can go in and bomb it well. And that's what the three of us find so frightening, because I think we all, the three of us agree that Iran actually is, those are false assumptions, that Iran actually has a very robust air defense and is in a position to easily penetrate the air defenses that the U.S. has deployed throughout the Persian Gulf at its various bases.
Yeah, Larry, of course. Let me say something. When it comes, I usually talk with Andrei Martyanov. You know Andrei Martyanov.
Yeah.
He's a friend of us. And one of the main points he brings up every time we talk, that this offensive, systems are much more advanced or much more capable of the, comparing to the defensive systems. When you attack, you're mostly successful in the way that you're attacking instead of defending yourself against those attacks. That's why I think the main power on the part of the Iranian army would be the offensive capability on the part of Iranians. How they're capable of using, long range, middle range, and short range missiles against the enemy. You can see in the Persian Gulf going to Israel and beyond Israel. This is the main goal, That's why he's talking about the doctrine has changed from defensive to offensive. The main defense, the best defense would be an offensive that is capable to dismantle the capabilities of the enemy to attack you. This is what's going on, as far as I know, in the mind of the Iranian generals.
Oh, Professor Marandi, back in October of 2024, that was the first time where that Iran did what I called a demonstration for Israel. They launched missiles that was in retaliation for Israeli attacks, but it was intended to demonstrate, to try to show Israel what Iran was capable of. And I still remember watching the video of that one hypersonic missile as it came down. It came down and it deviated, and then it was being maneuvered, which is remarkable technology. And I think Iran was trying to say, hey, look at what we can do. And yet the West completely dismissed it. And then we get into the 12-day war last June. And again, there is the way the message was presented has been presented to the American people. And it's told in Israel that Iran was ineffective. It's a lie, but that's how they're being propagandized to believe that Iran has a very limited missile capability, and so that's why, as I'm looking at it now, I think, and the question goes back to this general saying we're going to go on the offensive. Does that mean you think that if war breaks out, which I pray to God it doesn't, but if it does, Iran's not going to take its foot off the accelerator this time as it has in the past?
Yes, I agree. Of course, I don't know anyone in Iran who wants war, and war will be devastating for the world.
Yes.
But the fact is that I don't know about Iran's defense capabilities. They've been working on it since the war, but I'm sure that Iran's offensive capabilities are much better than their defensive capabilities, because we've already seen during the 12-day war how the two sides, or the three sides, Americans being with Israelis, how they battled each other. Although it's possible that Iran has received new technology or new systems from friendly countries, the Chinese, the Russians, but the point is that Iran's offensive capabilities are much more developed. And we know that from the likes of Steve Bannon, who said after the end of the 12-day war that the real story here is that the Israelis were in trouble and that Netanyahu needed a ceasefire. And during the last days of the war, the Iranians were hitting Israel very hard. So even if they're propagandized, ultimately at the end of the day, when the missiles start coming in and there's no oil and no gas, that propaganda will melt away. And this will be a war for Iran's survival. This is not a war where, like in the case of Israel, where the Iranians were firing back missiles to force the Israeli regime to accept a ceasefire. Here it would be something quite different. And U.S. missile defenses are very limited, and the targets in the Persian Gulf are quite diverse. It's not just U.S. bases. They will be oil installations. They will be tankers. How are THAAD missiles going to stop drones from destroying tankers? How are they going to stop drones from destroying other ships or oil installations? Sorry again. When you're flying into Qatar, you see all these gas installations in the water. Who is going to protect those? Or if they block the Strait of Hormuz, who is going to get through? If they sink a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, what is going to get through? So this is fantasy. But let us assume that they believe what they believe, and the war starts, and then the Iranians start hitting these installations, and they will start hitting the American ships. I mean, if the Americans could not defeat Yemen after 7 weeks,
right,
then how are they going to defeat the Iranians, who have a much larger, maybe incomparably larger drone and missile system? But one other thing that the U.S. government has to take into account is that if there is war, the Yemen that they lost to after 7 weeks will be a part of the war. And the Iraqi resistance will be a part of the war. And the Iraqi resistance would be new to the equation.
Right.
And they have underground missile cities. They can take U.S. bases in Iraq, and especially in northern Iraq. They can go into Kuwait. This would be, Ayatollah Khamenei said this would be a regional war. If it's a regional war, then I don't think there's a chance in the world that the United States could block Iran. Iraq itself is a country of 45 to, 50, 45, 48, 49 million people. Yemen, too.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Quit. Say that last part again. You froze up there for a minute.
Yeah, from Yemen too. You have to repeat, Professor Man.
Or is it?
Bahrain.
It seems that we have some sort of issue with Professor Man's connection.
Yeah, you're freezing up there.
Yeah, Professor Man, just a little bit.
Country is together have a population of
you're freezing up. Let me stop you there for a second to get to you.
He's out. He's Larry. He's going to be back in a minute.
Okay, so I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit just for people watching and listening. How has Iran changed since you were last there? Because I mean, you were a baby and an infant during the war in 1980s. So when the war ended, you were like 9 years old, 10 years old. So you didn't know what was going on, but you left Iran 12 years ago. So how has it changed?
Larry, the Iran that I have known before, it was, we had you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, Professor Marandi is here.
Yeah, I'm getting. I've asked Nima to. We'll come back to what you were talking about, but I wanted to get from Nima what he's seen the difference in Iran, or has he seen any difference? Because he left 12 years ago, and now he's back.
Larry, the experience Iranian had during the war between Iran and Iraq was somehow disappeared in the mind of those new generations. They had no idea what has happened in those days, and Professor Marandi was part of that war. He was participating and defending the country in those days. But for my generation and the younger generation, they had no idea of a war and how can it influence in the Iranian society, the Iranian economy, the Iran as a country, as a sovereign country. I think that was changed during the first attack, during the Israeli attack on Iran. And somehow showed how the people would react in the case of a war against Iran. And today, when you look at the mainstream media and the way they're talking about that, so let's fight Iran, let's attack Iran, that would bring the government down. Yeah. I think that's not going to happen, Larry. That's going to change drastically everything, because the people, the moment they see that the Israeli or American attack is destroying everything, the infrastructure is attacking and killing civilians, everybody would understand that this is not about, negotiation. This is not about any sort of, deal. It's about killing Iran as a country.
Yeah.
That's the change for my generation, for the new generations in Iran, because they understand that is not going to bring anything good to the future of this country, for the future of new generations. They don't want to sacrifice everything, because we know the devastation. Because right now, I'm getting back to what has happened to Iran during the war between Iran and Iraq, and we see how the population was suffering in those days, and in the aftermath, basically in the aftermath of the 8 years of war, the imposed war on Iran. Nobody wants that here in Iran. Nobody's, even willing to see those days coming back to Iran and to the future of Iran. And people, and these sort of realities are not reflected. Nobody's talking about these realities here in Iran.
Mhm.
All you hear in the mainstream media, even those people who are trying to be in the middle, somehow talking, to the both sides, they don't have a clear picture of the Iranian society. They don't know, they don't understand the Iranian society. The only issue, Larry, there are people out there talking about women, love, freedom, all of these, nonsense. That doesn't make sense anymore here in Iran. That doesn't resonate with the people here in Iran. The issue that the people are facing right now here in Iran is mostly, the pressure, the economic pressure on the part of the United States, and the way that they're trying to, collapse the Iranian currency.
Yeah.
This is the issue right now with the Iranian people. Nothing else. This is, in my opinion, if someone in the West wants to understand the Iranian society they want and what the Iranian people want, this is the whole issue. And the government is not going to stay the same because the world has changed. The world is changing today, Larry. I would say the war in Ukraine has changed everything. Everything. And we cannot get back.
How so? How has it changed?
That's changed because after the war in Ukraine, Larry, I was talking with with Ray McGowan. He said nobody would have believed in the United States that Russia and China would get that close.
Yeah.
The same is happening here in Iran. Iran is getting closer and closer to Russia and China. I haven't seen this before. I haven't even imagined that this would happen. But it's happening in terms of the economy, in terms of the security, the military. Iran is getting closer because Iran doesn't see a viable choice in the West. They don't see anybody capable of negotiating to understand the situation, the Iranian position. This is the whole point, in my opinion.
Professor Marandi, well, first let me acknowledge you are a war veteran. You were wounded at least twice. And you've also suffered the effects of getting gassed, the mustard gas that the United States helped provide Iraq. So you're not one of these armchair warriors. You've been in the fight, even though you are what I call a kind, gentle soul. There's some iron under that under that facade. But looking at the cooperation with Russia and China, when I started, really looking into this, I was surprised to learn that Russia and China started these joint military naval exercises with Iran back in 2019. And having scripted military exercises before, I know that doesn't start just a week or two before the event. It usually starts a year to 18 months in advance. What sparked that decision to develop that kind of cooperation? Did they just wake up one morning and say, hey, we need to do this, and why?
I think this was a gradual process. And for the Iranians, I think there were divisions that needed to be overcome with regards to how the Iranians will deal with the West and how they'll deal with the global majority. So, for example, I think the Rouhani administration, to a degree, sacrificed Iran's relationship with China and with Russia in order to get a nuclear deal. And the nuclear deal didn't work out, neither under Obama nor under Trump. And we were unable to benefit from good relations with non-Western countries as much as we should have because of those policies. Even though the leaders' policies were different from the administration's policy at that time. Then when President Raisi came, he was much more in line with the leader's position. And it was during his presidency that Iran joined BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Oh, after his demise, President Pezeshkian, I think, contrary to the expectations or the predictions of some of these analysts in the West, he actually moved in the same direction as President Raisi. And the 12-Day War actually created a national consensus.
Mm-hmm.
So after the 12-Day War, I think Iranian society, and I think this sort of goes back to what Nima was saying a few moments ago. After the 12-Day War, there was a shift in Iranian society. And those liberals, and among others who were concerned about Iran's growing relationship with Russia and China, those voices diminished substantially. In fact, Larry, one thing that I can say about Iranian society, and that is according to polls that are regularly carried out by different institutions here in Iran, is that now, or at least the last poll that I saw, which was not a very long time ago, now most Iranians want a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And the leader is in the minority. He is among the minority. So the 12-Day War had that sort of change of, or created that sort of change in perception. But in the West, they don't see this because the media, it's basically repeating the same talking points. And it doesn't matter if it's the New York Times, or if it's Fox News, if it's CNN or the BBC or Sky News or whatever, or The Guardian. When it comes to Iran, they're all more or less the same. And that is, Iran is completely evil. The so-called regime is deeply unpopular. Everyone hates it. It's about to fall. I mean, even I saw something from Trita Parsi today, which I found very strange. And he was claiming that in Iran, there are calls for military intervention. I don't know who these people speak with, but they, I think, live in this echo chamber, and they speak to like-minded people.
Let me interrupt. When you say military intervention, you mean that the military should intervene in the government?
No, like the West should, the United States should attack Iran and overthrow the government. It's ridiculous, and anyone who lives in Iran would know that that's not at all the mood in Iran. And maybe there are some insane people or some horribly biased people or some people who are fanatically supportive of the West, but that's just that perspective is so obscure and way out there that it's for me, it's strange that anyone could even believe such a thing. But ultimately the point that I'm making is that in Iran, perceptions about the world have changed. And now tilting to the global majority, moving towards BRICS, moving towards the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, enhancing military cooperation with the Chinese and the Russians makes lots of sense to ordinary people. People like me were pushing for this a long time ago, but there was a lot of resistance to it, and a lot of resistance to what I was saying in meetings and in gatherings. But now you don't see that anymore.
Yeah,
because people are beginning. First of all, they see that a lot of the things that are said about Russia and China are not accurate. What the Western, because the Persian media that's in the West, that's anti-Iran, is also very anti-Russian and very anti-Chinese. So people are always getting this very large dose of anti-Russian and anti-Chinese propaganda as well. That's a part of this. So, all the West is not just paying for the media to attack the Iranian government. They attack BRICS. BRICS is worthless. It's useless. It's not going to get anywhere. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is just a club where they sit together and nothing gets done. That's the sort of narrative that's constantly repeated. But people are seeing that a strong relationship with China has meaning. China is purchasing our oil, and our economy continues to grow despite all the antagonism of the United States. I mean, Nima's been to Tehran for a few days. I don't know if he used the metro, but if you go to the metro in Iran is much better than the metro in London, or the metro in infinitely better than New York.
Yeah, New York
And
City did a horror show there. Oh my-
Yeah, and it's rapidly growing. They're building new lines. It's not as if the Iranian economy is stagnant.
Yeah.
So when the Chinese are purchasing Iranian oil, despite U.S. threats and U.S. sanctions, when the Russians are cooperating with Iran, despite U.S. antagonism, well, gradually, even those liberals in Iran, even those who were traditionally pro-Western, when they see Israel bombing the country and bombing civilian targets and the U.S. supporting it and the Europeans supporting it, and they see that it's the Russians and the Chinese that are behaving reasonably and defending Iran at the UN Security Council, then the mood changes.
Yeah.
So this was a gradual process. I can't put my finger on a particular date or event, but it was a gradual process. But I think that the 12-day war, although it comes way after the beginnings of the maneuvers between Iran, Russia, and China, but I think the 12-day war in general was an important turning point in Iranian perceptions about the world.
Well, actually, let me see. I think there are two events, and I'd like the reaction of both of you to this. The first event was when Donald Trump walked away from JCPOA, because up to that point, Russia and China had basically signed on with Europe and the United States to impose sanctions on Iran. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump walks away from trashes it. And a year later, Iran, China, and Russia are starting to conduct naval military exercises. I think that was the first event where Russia and China went, okay, but we've got to have a different relationship with Iran. But then in the post-12-day war, it then kicked into another level of what I'd say an increased level of economic cooperation that didn't exist 3 years ago. And as a result of that, Iran now, the way I look at it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Iran now has options by virtue both of being a member of BRICS and then the declaration by Russia and China on the snapback sanctions telling Europe, no, we're not going to support that. Forget about it. And so I would say that Iran now actually has a brighter future economically ahead of it than was the case, a year or two ago. What do you think, Nima?
Yeah, Larry, let me bring something about JCPOA and how the situation right now is different from what it was during those days. That is the European role in the whole situation. In those days, the people in the administration, in the Rouhani administration, they thought that Europe can be a positive force in the whole negotiation and the system and the agreement between the United States and Iran. Europe has proven, as time went by, that they have nothing to offer to Iran. They did nothing. They did nothing when Donald Trump withdrew from the JCPOA. And of course, the 12-day war has shown how Europe is seeing Iran. They're literally seeing Iran as their enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And for many people, it doesn't make sense to me. Somehow it didn't make sense to me, but I totally understand it. I think the British government and the German government, they're no player. They are losing their importance in the mind of those decision makers here in Iran. If, let's assume, the new talks shaping and negotiations happening between Iran and the United States, I would assure you that Europe is not going to be in the same position anymore. And nobody would care about Europe that much that they cared before, because they have nothing to offer, Larry. They did nothing. Of course, they're mostly, influenced by Netanyahu and his administration. They're prepared, as Macron said that. He said, we are all in to attack Iran.
Yeah.
These are messages for those people who somehow we're optimistic about the role of Europe. That doesn't exist anymore. I think the situation, even you compare right now to what it was before, is the reality of JCPOA as an agreement and how things have changed in terms of development here in Iran, how the nuclear program has changed drastically. And the other point, which is related to the negotiators or guarantors of the agreement, is that Europe is not in that place. I would say Russia and China are much more relevant players for Iran right now than Europe.
Professor Marandi, what do you think?
I agree. But what I would add is that during the nuclear talks in 2015, there was a lot of optimism, as I think we all know, that a nuclear deal will lead to better relations with the West. Now, there were those who were skeptical. I was one of them. I think that's pretty well known. Even though I was with the nuclear delegation, I did go there at the request of Dr. Zarif. I stayed in Vienna with him during the whole 3 weeks of negotiations, and I was sort of like a media advisor. He wanted me to play a bigger role, but I didn't want to be a part of government as is the case today. So I was skeptical, but most people were optimistic. But then when Obama began violating the deal, whereas the Iranians were abiding by it, the bitterness began to grow, or the how should I put it? Skepticism began to grow. It still wasn't the majority, but it was growing. And then when Trump came, as you rightly alluded to, he tore up the deal.
Yeah.
And that wasn't supposed to happen because the Iranian government said that he can't do it. The president, Rouhani, said he can't do anything about it, Trump. And the and Dr. Zarif too did not believe that this could happen, that it was possible, but it happened and there were no consequences for the United States. And that, I think, led a lot of people to begin to rethink and think and conclude that the path taken by President Rouhani really wasn't it wasn't a smart move to put so many eggs in the Western basket. And he, as I said earlier, he sacrificed Iran's relationship with China and Russia, mostly China actually, in order to get this deal done. And it took President Raisi.
I was just going to say, explain that part about the relationship with China. What do you mean by that? How did signing on to the JCPOA affect Iran's relationship with China?
Well, Iran began to, under President Rouhani, they began to make things more difficult for Chinese companies in Iran. Iranian oil.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. You were getting like to the most important part, and then you froze. Are going, oh no.
Okay, well, the Chinese, they were, first of all, President Xi, when he came to Iran, the Chinese president, his negotiations with President Rouhani and his trip weren't that great. And President Rouhani, as I said, was looking to the West at that time. And China were not that welcome because they were hoping that Western companies, especially oil companies and gas companies like Total, would come in and invest. And I don't like saying this, but in my opinion, I wasn't in government, but I was always saying that Total will never invest in Iran. And ultimately, they didn't. They came to Iran, they took a building, rented a building, stayed a few years, and left. That's all they did. And I thought I was, not just me, others too, but I didn't think that the West would ever invest because I thought that the problems that we had with the United States and Europeans went far deeper than the nuclear issue, and that it was linked to the Israeli regime. It was linked to Zionism. That the Israeli regime would never allow the United States and the Europeans to have a decent relationship with Iran. It's just not doable. But in any case, after the United States left the deal and tore up the deal, the Europeans did nothing, and that alludes to what Nima was saying. Europe became increasingly irrelevant to Iran, and now the German chancellor wrote something, said a few nasty things about Iran over the past few months, and especially the last couple of weeks. And today we saw the Iranian foreign minister tweet against him, his tweet went had far more likes and retweets than the German chancellor's. And I think if anyone looks at the Iranian foreign minister's tweet, it is pretty harsh towards the German government. It is very harsh, actually. I don't recall ever seeing a tweet so harsh by an Iranian foreign minister. When I think he did the right thing, because of the insults that the German government had, the many insults that we received from them, the Iranians received from them. But the point is that, as Nima was saying, Europe has become irrelevant. The United States is unwilling and incapable of doing business with Iran. And there's another thing. J.D. Vance said a few hours ago that Iran is strange in that the Iranian leader, he's unwilling to speak to Trump. But I think J.D. Vance, in this, the arrogance of power makes him fail to recognize and understand that Trump killed so many Iranians in the war,
right,
by colluding with the Israeli regime. Forget the armed insurrection, but the war. And then during his first term, he tried to strangle the Iranian economy as much as possible, killing ordinary people. And he also killed General Soleimani and his companions. So why would Ayatollah Khamenei ever speak to, if he did speak to Trump, I think many people would be shocked. I cannot envisage him ever doing that. But Trump is so deeply despised in Iran and seen as someone who kills, someone who lies, someone who cannot be trusted, someone who will change his position from day to day. There's no reason for him to speak with him. And I think that either J.D. Vance is very ignorant about Iran, or the arrogance of power doesn't allow him to think rationally, or that this is just a part of the anti-Iranian propaganda. But what I think has happened is that Iran has decidedly shifted away from the West. And some people think, I as an English speaker, as someone who was born in the United States, I have no animosity personally towards the United States as a country.
Right.
But the second language in Iran at school is English, and many of our textbooks are in English, and if they're in Persian, many of them are translations of English textbooks. Not always. there are lots of other Iranian books as well, but our higher education is deeply influenced. And then you have the cultural history, the relationship, Hollywood, music, all sorts of things coming from the West for many, many decades. It's not as if, it's not as if like there's this hostility towards the American people. I think maybe we've discussed this when we were together in Moscow, that when Iranians chant death to America in their rallies, it doesn't have anything to do with the United States as a people. It is an anti-imperialist chant, just like when in Latin America they'd say "Yankee go home." They don't mean that the American guy who's walking down the street and shopping somewhere in Bolivia, or it means the U.S. government and U.S. imperialism. It has nothing to do with individuals. So the anger and hostility that's directed towards the U.S. government is something that's very widespread. If you look at polls in Iran, Trump is very unpopular. The U.S. government is very unpopular. Yeah. And that serves to create a greater incentive for better relations with China and Russia, especially at a time when the Russians, like ourselves, are sanctioned. So there's nothing to impede the relationship because no one is afraid of being sanctioned by the West. We're both sanctioned. And in the case of China, which is advancing so rapidly technologically, I mean, when you travel to China and go to different cities, they're decades ahead of everyone else. There's no doubt about it. And so when the doors to to the United States, Europe, as Nima said, is becoming increasingly irrelevant. But when the door is closed to the United States and they're open to Russia and to China, after a debate that lasted for years, for a few years, people are saying, let's go, let's use these doors. And then once these doors have been opened, Larry, that changes the whole dynamics. When I went to China for the first time, I remember going to Beijing, and I was told that there are like a handful of Iranian students in Beijing. A while back, I went to a smaller city in China, and for a CGTN program, and in Tianjin, and they brought a number of international students to participate, and there were just in that small crowd, there are 3 Iranian students in that, from that city. The number of Iranian students studying in China today, or in Russia today, or in other countries that are non-Western today are much greater than before.
Yeah.
So imagine 10, 15 years from now, when these people have graduated and the next generation has graduated. When I was young, when I was just an academic, almost everyone went to the West to study. Now people are spread out across the world. And so that is going to influence the way in which these people, who they marry, who they do business with, who they communicate with, who they want to cooperate with. It's not going to be like before. So once when you keep pushing the people away from yourself, like the United States has done for decades, then these people are going to look for new opportunities. And once they find those opportunities, they're not going to go back.
Yeah. In fact, I saw there's a channel on YouTube called Inside China Business by an American named Kevin Wamsley, who's actually from Sarasota, Bradenton area. And he put up a video the other day noting that the top engineering schools in the world right now are all in China. They're not the MIT, which was the number 1 ranked school in the United States, is number 13 on that list. So, Nima, you did your engineering because you're an engineer, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh boy, I hate smart people.
They're changing.
But you went to school in Germany, correct?
Yeah, I went to Germany. I was there for 5 months. Then I received, the scholarship from other countries. Then I decided to go to Brazil. Everybody, I remember, Larry, in those days, everybody said, no, don't go to Brazil. My supervisor in Germany said, don't go to Brazil. That's going to be, different. I am so happy today that I have chosen Brazil.
Yeah.
Because Brazil is amazing, in my opinion, and has a bright future, bright future in one of the most important countries in the southern part of, American continent.
Well, let me ask
Let me
you.
say something else in that direction that you've mentioned. Just 2 years ago, people in Iran, I received emails from different people who want to get scholarship from outside, from other countries. They want to know how is Brazil, how is the United States. They want my experience. Then he told me, one of these people who contacted me, it was more than, but one of them that I remember vividly right now is that he asked me that he's receiving this amount of scholarship from Chinese government and this from the United States. And the value was not even comparable.
Yeah. Well, actually, the
told him, sir, there is no comparison. Go to China.
Yeah, the cost, Walmsley talked about that as well. The cost of going to like MIT is $68,000 a year. And in China, it's 4,000. Yeah, I mean, you know, you don't have to be an economics major to figure out where the better deal is. But all right, guys, listen, I've kept you more than an hour. I am so appreciative of your time, but I think it's important to get, for people to hear Nima and Mohammad, that they find out, geez, these are very smart Iranians. These are very cultured Iranians. These are very humane Iranians. You're not these wild-eyed terrorists blowing up the world. That's a lie that the United States keeps perpetuating. So you're doing your part for public diplomacy. I want you both to stay safe.
Thank you, Larry.
All right, and
Thank you, Larry. It's always a pleasure being on your show, and I hope we see better days soon.
yeah, and I hope to be with you at some point soon. And one of these days, maybe I'll get down to go to Brazil and see
Sure.
Nima in his new natural habitat.
Sure.
Me too.
All right,
It
my
would be
friends.
an honor to have both of you.
Well, I pray for peace, and I want you all to be safe. Yeah, God bless.
Thank you. For now, I have to fix this chair. It's terrible. It's it's very uncomfortable. But for now we have to pray for the best. And I know they're tough. These are tough times, and for people across the world, really. But
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic person by nature.
Okay, those are like I could call them almost my adopted sons. Nima is the age of my son. Professor Marandi is a little bit older, but they're both great men, great human beings. And I hope you got some insights into the situation in Iran right now. I do pray for peace. I appreciate you taking this time to watch. Hopefully you found it worth your while. Hit that like and subscribe button. And until the next episode, I'm Larry Johnson, and this has been Countercurrents. Thank you for watching.